I gotta. That's one thing that they could have skipped out on.
Well, I bet you a lot of people are like, is it recording?
Yeah.
And so no.
This meeting is being recorded. Keep your hands on.
Do a 1 hour presentation, being a recording.
Yeah.
So-
And also close your porn tabs. There's a teacher who got let go, and they don't fire bad teachers, but this one we haven't seen, and that's because he was doing that during Zoom distance. He had all of his tabs open, all of his sites he was visiting on his school computer.
Wow.
View slideshow.
Well, they hired that guy back from CNN.
Who did it? Yeah.
Anyway, the separation of priest king. So we were just discussing a little bit like where we were, and we went kind of fast forwarded in the Moses story to after they've been delivered. But now we're going to kind of go back in time and see where this separation between priest and king comes from. So just to kind of give a brief overview, but again, even though I'm kind of recapitulating some of this, I want to sort of paint a different picture. So it's kind of the same story, but with a little bit of a different direction. Okay, so just bear with me here a little bit. But in any case, humans were made in God's image and likeness. And the two words that we have for that are tselem and demut. Tselem meaning image and demut meaning likeness. Those, if you remember, are the same two words that elsewhere in the Bible are translated idols. Okay, so if you picture, the Eden as the sacred space, then God has his own physical representation there. He has the tselem and the demut in the garden, acting as his kings and priests within sacred space. That image is expressed in two key ways from the beginning. And that is that Adam and Eve are portrayed both as kings and priests. They're not directly called kings and priests, but we have the language in Genesis to suggest that they are. First of all, you have the words to rule and to have dominion, which elsewhere in scripture, again, is when you're talking about rule and dominion, that's king language. A king is somebody who rules and has dominion. But there's something else, and it's a little bit more subtle, and that is that they are told to work and to keep the garden. So they're supposed to work and keep sacred space, which is Eden. But again, Eden overlaps with the idea of temple and sanctuary. Those words are abad and shamar. The only other times that those two words are used throughout scripture is whenever the Levites were working and keeping the sanctuary. That abad and shamar only show up together in other passages where the priests are told to are abiding and shamaring the either the temple or the tabernacle. And then we have that quote that I love from N.T. Wright that says, this whole idea of kings and priests is the articulation of what it means to be genuinely human, standing between creator and creation, summing up creation's praises before God and bringing God's rule to bear upon creation. And it's a great summary of that. Adam and Eve and all of humanity are made in his likeness, and their main calling has always been to be kings and priests. So we developed this need for a priest king in the future because, as we know, that Adam and Eve, they violate that sacred space, or they violate that relationship that they have within sacred space or Eden by trying to be like God, even though they are already made in his image. God makes them in his image, and Adam and Eve want to be like him. Well, they're already like him, and like as much as they should be, and so It's a total deception. Basically, they want to take things on their own hands. So that they're exiled from sacred space, which brings up the question: how does humanity return to being king priest to God? So we need a new Adam and a new Eve. We need a new humanity. So we're looking at the new creation, of course, and we know who the new Adam is. As a side note, last time I actually brought up the Eve idea. Well, what would it mean to have like a new Eve? But when you look, I won't get into this today that much, but and I don't even know if I will in the future. But you have, but you know, like if you remember when we were doing Revelation 12, we had the woman, and she's waiting. Um, she's in child labor and everything, but you know about the bride of Christ, and the bride of Christ is his body. And when Paul talks about Christ, when he talks about married couples in the church, you know, he starts talking about let the man um, sacrifice and give himself up like Christ gave himself up for the church. Then he quotes Genesis, and he says, therefore a man will leave his mother and father, and the two shall become one flesh, right? And he says, but I'm talking about Christ. I'm speaking in mystery. He says, I'm actually talking about Christ. And then he kind of changes the subject. He's using his advice to men how to treat their wives, and what he's doing is he's actually citing Jesus and the church, and he's citing that relationship. And of course, when you get to Revelation, you see the whole Jerusalem, which represents all of God's people as a community, presented as a bride. And so, you have like this reunification between God and humanity, expressed in a way where, you know, you have like basically the new Adam and Eve again in that sense, you know, Christ and the assembly. There is a play with that idea, but in any case, that's a little bit of a side topic. And then, in other words, well, in any case, a coming Messiah, a priest king, is promised to Eve. Eve, you know, she knows that is going to be somebody who's going to trample on the serpent's head, but the serpent's going to strike him and everything. So from that point, the biblical quest is to pinpoint who this new priest king is supposed to be. And you can do that through tracking lineages, right? So who will be this priest? So just outside, so there you have that story that starts of the seed. Where's the seed? And you have Cain and Abel. Well, which one of these is going to be the seed, right? And just outside of Eden, you see Eve's seed, Cain and Abel. They offer sacrifices, which is a priestly act, and they're right outside of sacred space. They're right by the Garden of Eden. Still, they're just outside of it. And Abel's is accepted, even though Cain's is not. So you would think, well, Abel's got to be the seed, right? But the problem is that he gets killed, and his brother can't be the seed because he's a murderer, and he gets exiled even further from sacred space. So it brings up a question: well, who's going to be the seed? So Eve, a little bit later, she bears another son, and she says to replace Abel. Okay. That's the way she perceives it, and she goes, "God's given me a new son to pursue," and she and it again focuses on Eve, okay, because it's her seed. We're looking at the seed of the woman, and so that's what we're supposed to be focused on. Because in a paternal society like that, you would normally just be thinking about like who's Adam's son is, right? So then this new seed, he is born now, but he's also born in the likeness and image of Adam. It's those same two Hebrew words for likeness and image. So you've got Seth, who's like now kind of like an embodiment and representation of Adam. And so we trace this line, in any case, all through Scripture. We go from Seth, we go to Noah, and from Noah down to Shem, from his sons. We know that the Semites, or the Jews, are going to come from Shem. So from Shem, it goes to Abraham, and then from Abraham, of course, to Jacob. And from Jacob, it goes all the way to Judah, from Judah to David, and from David all the way to Jesus. So we are looking for that priest king. And each time that something happens, something significant happens, and you get this a picture of someone in the Bible who really seems to shine as a priest, or really seems to shine as God's anointed king or something. The reader in their mind is going, can this be the one? Can this Moses guy be the one? But there's flaws there. Something's wrong with the picture. So you get pictures of it on one hand, but you also know that, well, they don't quite fit that picture because they're pretty flawed. This can't really be the seed, but maybe one from their line is, and you keep on anticipating it throughout Scripture. So not from the line. When we get to Abraham, we encounter a plot twist. And this plot twist is that Melchizedek shows up out of nowhere, and he's introduced as being both king and priest of the Most High God. But he's not even related to Abraham, so he's not even one of the seed. And yet he's Abraham's priest. He acts as Abraham's priest. In fact, Abraham pays him a tithe. And the writer of Hebrews reflects on this and goes, this Melchizedek guy is, he's greater than Abraham, because Abraham pays him tithes as if Melchizedek is his sort of gateway person to the sacred space, or communication with God, even though God has really talked with Abraham himself, and the writer of Hebrews even says that even Levi, through Abraham, is actually paid tithes to Melchizedek. So the way the writer of Hebrews sees it is that even the Levites, who became the priests of Israel, in retrospect, they paid tithes to Melchizedek, even though they were, as the writer says, still in Abraham's loins, right? But this is somebody greater. So he becomes this myth. The first priest mentioned in the Bible is a mystery figure, and he's going to come into play later. David's going to start figuring some things out, and then later some other writers outside of the Bible are going to start speculating about it. So the other thing is that he's king and priest of Jerusalem. It's the king of Salem. So nobody in Israel's history would be both priest and king of Jerusalem. There's nobody, because you had the Levites on one hand, and you had the people from Judah, the kings from Judah on the other hand, but none of them would be both. The only one who was ever king and priest in Jerusalem was Melchizedek. So why was there never a king priest in Jerusalem? And it's because the offices of the priest and kings were split. And we're going to get into why that happened, or how that happened today. So where did this split occur? It began before it even got started for Israel. So Israel had no priests or kings because they were just a budding nation. Jacob, he moves with his 12 sons into Egypt. They're a family and a clan, and they develop, but they don't into like this thousand, a million people plus maybe 2 million people in the land of Goshen within Egypt, but they don't even have their own country. So obviously they don't have their own king, but they don't have their own priest either. So there's neither one of those things. But you're seeing like that budding idea of having their own leadership and having their own priesthood, right? Now, Moses was presented with the honor, really, of being both the spiritual and the political leader of a nation in the making. And because having Aaron there was not God's idea. This is not something that God says, like Moses, I want you to do this and I want you to call your brother Aaron to do. This comes out of Moses basically arguing with God, right? It starts with the angel of the Lord talking to Moses and calling him from the burning bush. Moses objects 5 times. God responds to 4 of those objections with a phrase starting with, I will be. So this is the story where God reveals his name, I am. And every time Moses says, how am I going to do, then goes, I will be there. I'll be your mouth. I'll be this, that. And God has these, all these I will be statements. And he calls himself the I am. But in spite of God revealing that who he is to Moses and that he's going to be with Moses this whole time, and showing Moses that Moses just has objections instead of trusting God. So the first time that God gets angry, or that the Bible actually says that God gets angry, you might be thinking, is at this point. Some people will say, well, what about Noah and the flood? The only thing that says that God's mood or what he felt about it is that God was grieved. It never says that he was angry. We can say there's a judgment there and some other things, but he's never recorded as saying that. In the Hebrew, it's like you have this phrase like somebody's nostrils burn hot, right? It's kind of like if you picture a bull, in a cartoon when they're blowing out hot air, out of their nose. Yeah, it's yeah. When he gets angry, it's I think the wording is something like God's Yahweh's nose grew hot, something like that. And in other places where it says that God is long suffering or that he's very patient or slow to anger, it says that he has a long nose. And it actually suggests that it doesn't get hot too quickly or something like that. It's a funny way to put it, but like this is the first time that Yahweh's nose gets hot. Okay, is at Moses just saying, "Go send somebody else. Just send somebody else." Fully tells God that. So in verse 13 in Exodus 4, it says, "But he said, 'Oh, my Lord, please send somebody else.' Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses," or in Hebrew, that his nose grew hot against Moses. And he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite?" Okay, let me stop there. Moses is Aaron's brother. He's just as much of a Levite as Aaron is. So the author wants to make sure that you notice that like this is where the Levite and the Levitical priesthood is going to come from. Okay, but he goes, "What about your brother, the Levite?" It's like, wait a minute, I'm a Levite. That's my brother you're talking about. So God is like, how about your brother, the Levite? I know he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you both what to do. He will speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and ye shall be as God to him. In other words, God's saying what that's quite a phrase there, and you shall be as God to him, right? It's like I'm not going to talk to Aaron. Well, he does actually talk to Aaron directly sometimes, or he says, but he's like, so here's where you're starting to see something happen that, like, first of all, this is a concession. This isn't God's plan A, for him. But second of all, he's going to be, Aaron is going to be a priest for Moses, but he's also going to be, in a sense, a priest to Moses. So later on, when you have the Holy of Holies, Moses is not allowed in the Holy of Holies. Even though he's a Levite, right? And so it's kind of like, no, you forfeited that. Okay, even though you've been on the mountaintop and in my presence, which is ironic because that's what the tabernacle and the Holy of Holies is supposed to represent. In fact, kind of a spoiler alert, Aaron's going to screw up royally, like, make a golden calf and everything. Moses is going to go to the mountaintop and be the priest for Aaron at that point and say, don't kill him and don't kill these people. And in fact, I'm going to offer my own life instead of theirs. So he becomes this priest acting in sacred space on a mountaintop to save the people and to offer his own life as a sacrifice, even. And it becomes such a picture in a way of Christ in the future or whatever, that he comes down from that experience glowing. Like the priests were all dressed in white and they're supposed to portray and be the shining ones. Moses actually becomes the shining one for a while, but it's kind of like, this is kind of like what God had wanted the whole time. But now he's going to have a priest under him, but Aaron's also going to be a priest for him. So he's going to be like God to Aaron and say, this is what you need to say. This is what you need to do. You've got like a priest talking to God and God giving them instructions or whatever. Well, like Moses is going to play that role to him. And he is the political leader too, So it starts with this incomplete obedience, and that's a nice way of saying disobedience, okay? Because you see that you see some things that Moses and Aaron are doing, and if you're paying attention, you're going, this isn't really exactly what God said to do, right? So in Exodus 3, it says, and they will listen to your voice, and you and the elders will go to Israel. The elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt. So it's the elders that are supposed to go with Moses to see Pharaoh, right? And you're going to say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Those are their instructions. This is what happens instead. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, so it's Moses and Aaron, where are the elders? You even bring the elders along, And they said, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go that we may hold a feast to me, in the wilderness. So you're going, This happens with Abraham and stuff all the time. This is so common that like it's easy to miss these little things because you're going, okay, God tells Abraham, get up and go and look at all the land I'm getting. So Abraham gets up and he travels a little bit and then he camps under the trees of Mamre. And you never hear God like chiding him for that. But you're going, wait, I thought he was supposed to go like way up there, way up into the area of Syria and Damascus. That doesn't happen until he gets into that fight and he has to go rescue Lot. That's when he gets there, and then he has to go do all that, right? But so here it's always like these little missteps, and you're kind of like, it's not quite right, but God's not really making a big deal out of it, so it's easy to miss this stuff. So, but you get a bad start. This is not a glamorous picture, and it's not a glamorous beginning to the whole Levitical priesthood. So the biblical narrative is not going to be friendly to this all these priests. They're actually going to be very critical about it, these writers. So shortly afterwards, we see Aaron setting up the golden calf, right? So that's a huge, because you're going, wait a minute, now this guy is chosen to be like lead up the Levites, And the first ever priest Levite is like this guy who sets up a golden calf, and like that's a horrible start, right? No, it's really bad. And then later we're going to see the failure of Aaron's sons. Aaron's sons, they go to set up the tabernacle, and they're setting up the tent in Leviticus, and they get killed. God kills them because they burn strange incense. It's like I didn't ask for that. What are you doing? Strange fire, right? And they're like, and he kills them with fire, basically. And it's like, you want strange fire? I'll show you the strange fire. But later on, we're going to see a descendant of Aaron. Didn't they get burned up? They got burned up?
I don't know. I just keep on thinking about gold dust. You want me to look it up?
No. Okay, I read the story earlier today, and I already forgot. Actually, I have it here now. I'll look it up later, but we'll see a descendant of Aaron. I forget what happened. God struck him dead in any case. So later on, we're going to see. So I retract all that. I retract the God burning them up. I don't remember what happened to them. We'll see a descendant of Aaron, Eli, who allows his sons to steal people's offerings, and they're sleeping with women in the courtyards of the tabernacle. So this is where Samuel actually comes in, and he's going, God has told you, like, is telling you now that, like, he's going to take the priesthood and away from your line, and he's going to give it away to somebody else. And then what happens is you have Samuel, who is a Levite, and you're thinking maybe Samuel's going to be this new Messiah figure or whatever, But what happens with Samuel is that he anoints somebody. But he doesn't anoint a Levite. He anoints somebody from Judah, and it's a king. And that's where that's where you're going to get another like plot twist. You're going, wait a minute, We'll get into that in a little bit. So it's a compromise. The whole Levitical thing is compromised from the beginning. It's a compromised project. Here's a missed opportunity. So there's a writer named Joshua Matthews. He wrote a book called Melchizedek's Alternative Priestly Order, or it's a paper, I'm not sure. But he says, Aaron's first introduction into the narrative of the Pentateuch comes in conjunction with Yahweh's burning anger and as a concession for Moses' apparently faithless resistance to Yahweh's instructions. Moses was punished for his unwillingness to accept Yahweh's commission and likewise denied the honor that would have come with it. He missed his opportunity. The glory of fulfilling the task did not belong to Moses alone, but it was shared in part with his brother Aaron. The author seems to be portraying the scenario as gradually deviating from what Yahweh initially envisaged, or what the ideal scenario might have been had Moses not responded with such resistance. It's a mouthful, but at least it's some stuff we've already kind of covered. And the Bible Project says this, and I love that they point this out. This is a replay of Adam and Eve's failure in the garden. Once again, God's chosen representative has failed to fulfill his calling, even in front of a magnificent tree brimming with God's own life and presence, and I put in on a sacred mountain. Moses fails his first test, which is to trust God, because Moses is on Mount Sinai at the time. That is the mountain that God is going to use as his holy mountain and speak to Moses on, right? And he has failed to fulfill his calling even in front of the magnificent tree. And you got to think of like the tree of life, right? In front of the magnificent tree brimming with God's own life and presence. It's a great like portrayal there. Like you have the tree that's got God's presence on it. You're on the mountaintop, God's holy mountain, and you're tasked like Adam and Eve, be a priest and a king. And he's like, no, send somebody else. no, you're still going to go, but now your brother's going to go with you. That's the Israel's opportunity. So this is what happens a bit later on. In Exodus 19, we see on the third new moon after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. They set out from Rephidim and came into the wilderness of Sinai, and they encamped in the wilderness. There Israel encamped before the mountain. They go to the same place. They go to the same place that God was on in the barn, at the burning bush, and it called Moses, right? Now he's going to call them, okay? While Moses went up to God, the Lord called to him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall become to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." He's saying, Moses saw me in a burning bush. You saw me as a people bring you through the Red Sea and the water piled up on both sides and all these miracles and the plagues and all that kind of stuff, and that you were protected from all this stuff. Are you going to trust me? Because if you'll trust me and obey me, you're going to be a nation of kings and priests, and you're going to represent me to the whole world. You're going to be a holy nation full of a royal priesthood, right? And we know the rest of that story, that they do the same thing. So what Israel is offered is an opportunity to be a holy nation of kings and priests. This is the opportunity given to Moses that Moses had recently been given, and he forfeited. Now they've been given it, and they're forfeiting it. Adam and Eve forfeited their roles as priest kings by not trusting God. So this is a pattern that is repeated in the stories of Moses and Israel. Ideally, all humans should be priests of the Most High God. After the fall, only certain humans fill this role. They were a picture of Adam and Eve in the garden, for a part. However, they repeatedly fail, so you know that something's wrong with this picture. So the question in the story becomes, when will we see somebody who's both priest and king and from Israel? Okay, because we've seen some guy, Melchizedek, who's not even from Israel. We've even seen, a priest who isn't even he's from Midian, but we know that he's not in the seed, the line. Also, we have a dilemma. The Levites have the corner on priesthood now, right? But the coming kingly line is going to come from Judah. So how are you going to ever have a priest king? Because they're going to be coming from two different lines. So coming up, we're going to see a ruddy teenager named David from the line of Judah, and he's going to be anointed by a Levite. And he is going to start to see that the future priest king is going to come from him and not the Levitical line. At some point, he's even going to dress up like a priest by wearing a linen ephod, and he's going to do some priestly things. And of course, he's going to write a psalm that says, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand sit at my right hand until basically, the nations are going to be defeated, and until I make you the nations your footstool." In other words, he's talking to a future king. I said, you are a priest forever in the line of Melchizedek. And you start going, wait a minute. Now we're talking about a priest king sitting at God's right hand. And David knows to bring Melchizedek into this picture and go, you're a line in the order forever in the line of in the order of Melchizedek. That's where we really start seeing where this is going to go. So now you're seeing those connections, right? And you got like some of these idiots who are saying, oh, we should disconnect from the Old Testament or something like that. They call themselves pastors and they got no idea what they're talking about. It's no, that's just plain old heresy, and it's just Satan's ploy to like screw up the story. Because once you do that, then you can make up anything out of the New Testament that you want to. Like
Not
you.
just that, but you're missing the whole picture of what that means to us.
Yeah.
About us.
Yeah. Priest kings. You detach yourself from that whole story, and like all the roads point to Jesus. And you're going. So, like, on one hand, you have Judaism, which has lost it's lost the focus of the story, and then because the first century Jews, they were thinking, who can this be? We need a king, we need a priest, we have Levites, we don't really have a king anymore right now. Somebody's going to come. He's going to be at the same time a suffering servant, or or maybe God's just talking about Israel there or whatever. But you have all these things, ideas, and then when Christ comes at the right time, then the people who are looking into these things are going, wait a minute, all of these things connect, and they point to Christ.
Yeah.
And then on the side of Christianity, you have um, well, we believe in the New Testament, but the Old Testament, even calling it just the Old Testament and treating it like it's like we're done with that or something, that attitude detaches you from your roots, your story, and the meta narrative, and then so like you've got like you need to kind of like reconnect with that, and then you start seeing what Paul means, and you start seeing what Peter's talking about, about king, and then you get revelation in John and saying they shall be kings and priests forever, and all those things. So it's such a cool story. I love it. The more I learn about it, the more I'm going, oh, it's been there the whole time, unbelievable. Yeah,
How close do you think?
I do.
Yes, I do.
In fact, yeah. Never mind. You're gonna watch some Chosen afterwards. We usually watch The Chosen like an episode or something after. Yeah,
There's a new episode next Wednesday.
I know. I can't wait. Every time I watch it, I tear up.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, the Psalm of David. The Lord says to my Lord, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool." The Lord sends forth from Zion. That's Jerusalem, and the holy mountain, right? The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter, rule in the midst of your enemies. We're talking about a king. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in holy garments. Holy garments were for priests. From the womb of the morning, the dew of your mouth will be yours. The Lord has sworn, and he will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter chiefs over the wide earth. He will drink from the brook by the way. Therefore, he will lift up his head. Yeah, it's and he's not just talking about like earthly kings, but rulers, powers, authorities, and all that kind of stuff. All those things get tied in there,
Yeah.
But it's such a huge, like, majestic story. It's so cool. So,
Earlier when you were asking or talking about if
let me see.
he killed them all or something, were you talking about at the cat where the golden calf was?
No. Here, let me share screen. Let me go to Safari, and then I think, well, Leviticus and ESV. I think it's in Leviticus 10. So the death of Nadab and Abihu. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid the censer on it and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded. And fire came out from before the Lord, and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. So I remembered right. Yeah, so they gave him strange fire, and God gave them some strange
He
fire.
was like, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, that word unauthorized is also the meaning strange.
Yeah, unauthorized. Yeah. Then Moses said, that's so I was right.
It's like God needed a burn off.
Yeah,
Crispy.
yeah.
Talk about refine me in the flames.
Yeah. Refiner's fire. Yeah. So, and you know what? Things go good. Things go poorly with the Levites. Things go really poorly with the kings. And God, he was even like sketched out about like, I don't want you guys to have a king. He wasn't really for it. And then after a while, he did choose David, but he used that mistake sort of to say, this is where my Messiah is going to come from. So God in his foreknowledge knew everything. He planned the Levites, not as like, like you say, this wasn't God's first plan. This it wasn't like God's like, well, let me go back to the drawing board. It's not like that. God's like, I know what Moses is going to do. I know how this is going to go with them. And I'm going to use that to bring the Levites about. I know what these people are going to, they're going to demand a king. I'm going to be against it. But since they are, I'm going to bring my king through this line of David. God's always, got the plan in place. But if you think about like what kings and priests are, they are the spiritual leaders and they are the political leaders. And they are the two most powerful and corruptible forces that you can think of. If you're talking about like politics and religion, that's where the most nefarious and evil stuff can come from if it goes wrong. And it was sad because I was asking somebody today, I've been asking, what comes to mind when I say priests? Somebody who can talk to. No, this is the last person I asked that said, oh, pedophilia.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but like, well,
It's got a connotation.
it's kind of like, that's a sad indictment. It's like, what do you think about like kings? When I talk kings, I think oppression, I think tyranny. I think like elites who don't care about anything that's going on with the people. And when you read like some of the indictments against the priests in the Bible, like you're shepherds that are fattening yourselves, and these are like not good things. And
So many of them now. You're
Yeah.
reading and it's like, what did they do? They didn't worship God. They went and they directed people into the horrible things towards idols.
Yeah,
And then here we come one who had the right track,
yeah,
turn the people back towards we're going to worship God. And his child, or the one after, would turn around and do the same, go back.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The kings were tyrannical and oppressive, and then the priests were abusive and used their used their spiritual clout as a cudgel and to serve themselves, and it didn't go well, and that's kind of like, that tells you something about like why it's been such a struggle. And then when you get Christ, you have somebody who is going to bring the sacrifice like a priest is to do. He's going to go to the mountaintop in the presence of God. And instead of like killing an animal, he's going to offer himself up as a sacrifice. He's going to bring himself as a sacrifice. And his enthronement is not going to be one where he has subdued other people and, you know, like made them do what he wants. And he is going to, his enthronement is going to be a crown of thorns, and he is going to be, and he is going to be subject himself to the darkest rulers of the age, both the spiritual and the political. He's going to be under the thumb. It's going to be a Roman crucifixion. It's going to be really painful. It's where we get the word excruciating from. It's from the cruce, you know, like excruciating. And he's going to be the priest who tears down the veil and opens the way by providing himself as a sacrifice, and so that we can become priests and kings again. He's going to do this on behalf of humanity because it has to be a human, and he'll be the new Adam, who's both priest and king, and drag us into the mix if we'll follow him, so that we can be the nation of kings and priests that Israel was offered to be. And we become the holy nation, as the New Testament's writers see, we become the holy nation of kings and priests who will rule forever with Christ, who offer ourselves up as living sacrifices too. So Paul says, offer yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to him, like Christ did. You know, people who are of the same character of Christ, and the same kinds of, if you want to be the kind of king that Christ is, then you have to be the kind of priest that Christ is, you know, and that involves sacrifice.
Yeah, if you were to think about it, they were all about the need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where Jesus, he didn't.
It's
And the ones who did direct, you know, Messiah, and it wasn't about them. It was about God.
yeah. Some people call it the upside down kingdom, you know, and he was telling the people who are going to follow him, you know, you want to follow the king, pick up your cross, and follow me. And those who are going to put themselves first are going to be last. And those who put themselves, and those who are going to be like last, they'll be put first. And blessed are the meek. Blessed are the meek, because they will inherit the earth. That's kingdom language. They are going to be kings. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are, you know, that whole Sermon on the Mount, set on a mountaintop, presented to the heavenly council, the holy ones, the assembly, which is what the church means, right? The assembly. It doesn't just mean, oh, church versus Israel. That to me, it makes less and less sense in my mind that there is a distinction about that. But in any case, that you have the holy assembly, and he's talking to them like, you are the light of the earth, the city on the hill. Nations are going to come to you. You're going to be the living waters, the streams that were originally in Eden, feeding the whole world, feeding the rivers that went to, what are the rivers again in like that come, you know, like you have a river coming from Eden, right? You have the basically the Euphrates and Tigris, right? The Gihon, and then and if you look at the places, the Gihon is in Israel, right? Goes to Israel, but the other places are like Egypt, Babylon, Syria, the places of exile, and you have the waters basically going to those the places of exile, and that's where, you know, and so like when Israel ends up like in exile, God is like, bring Eden here, you know, Joseph, save this place, you know, like make it flourish, make it wealthy, He does this with Pharaoh. David sounds almost just like the Joseph story. It's like he's over there. He's lifted up into a high position or whatever. and the Jeremiah says, when you go there, plant vineyards, be fruitful and multiply. Basically, all this Eden language. It's like, you know, and when it comes to us, it's like we're in exile, and we bring the water to a dry and arid land because we carry Eden with us, because we're the priests and kings of Eden, bringing the rivers of living water coming out of you. It's all that imagery that the Bible just like gets repeated, and you see it in these stories, and yeah, it's phenomenal. Okay, that's about it. What do you think? Anybody questions or?
Comment.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing all this. I know the little bit of the backstories, but now you're bringing it to life. That means so much. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, you're welcome. Danny's got a question.
If the lineage was to continue through David,
Uh-huh.
how would God pick Saul? Do you think it was like a temporary thing, or had hope in him?
Yeah, what happened with Saul?
The people.
Yeah. I think, yeah, the people picked Saul. Yeah.
Just like you said earlier.
Yeah.
God didn't want them to
Yeah.
be, but they kept being persistent.
Yeah.
And they picked Saul
That's a
because
good
he
point.
was
Yeah.
tall and,
Yeah, I got to look closer to that story, because I'm going, did God pick him? He has Eli anoint, or like pick him as king, but it is like you said, that's because the people were and then God says, no, I'm going to pick a man after my own heart after that.
And he let them run their little course. Okay, this
Yeah.
is what you want.
Yeah.
We're gonna tweak it now.
Yeah, and what's weird about Saul too is Saul tries to be like, well, Saul even prophesies, right? And so you're going, so you're thinking, wow, here's somebody who's just been anointed king. He's a king prophet. What about priest? And he does this sacrifice, which God is like, what's this bleating of sheep? And it's like, like, oh, I made the sacrifice, like I'm a priest now or something, right? And he's like, yeah, it's like, oh, you're a priest now. No, I demand obedience, not sacrifice. It's like, no, you're screwed up. I'm gonna find somebody else. That's basically, and it sends him a thorn in the. It sends him like a troubling spirit, or an evil spirit, Just like, wow, he hands him way over, Yeah. You've rejected my word, and I'm going to reject you. And I think that, it stems from like, yeah, he came as basically Israel's insistence,
It's kind of sad because that's like he's another example of not following God's instruction, like how Moses did,
Right.
or Abraham did.
Yep.
And I think that's what he shot himself in the foot. Really.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. He had an opportunity. And then at the same time, you see David screwing up a lot too. But, the outcome's always a little bit different. Like Abraham does some horrible things, and then God always like, well, okay, like you lied about like Sarah being your sister and all that kind of stuff, but I'm going to strike Pharaoh, and because like those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. And this guy just kind of cursed you, even though maybe or something, like and it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, this curse come upon me because like and you're going, this has nothing to do other than like God chose Abraham, and sometimes with David you kind of get the same feeling, like this has got to be like because God chose David, not, but David does have more of a heart for God, and you see that in the long run. Anyway.
I had a thought when you were talking. Well, anyway, throughout the whole night, really, because you were talking about. Didn't you say the word aroma?
Roma,
Oh, Roma, or am I making that?
maybe.
Well, whatever. But you were, but I'll read this and then it has something to do with what you were saying. But 2 Corinthians 2:14 to the end of the chapter. But thanks be to God who in Christ always leads us in triumphal procession and through us. And so just picture in your mind right now, like you're the priest, right?
Mhm.
You're the kings and the priests. Um, you're co-heirs with Christ. And what does the priest do? The priest, offers a sacrifice to the Lord, right? And I think it was last time we were together, we talked about how praise and lifting up our hands is part of that sacrifice,
Yeah.
right? And so here's some more like just the imagery of how we are sacrificing to the Lord. And so just picture that in your mind while I continue. So who always Christ always leads us in triumphal procession, and through us spreads the fragrance of the knowledge of him everywhere. So I'm just thinking about like the
Incense.
fragrance of the incense.
Yeah. Yep.
And then it continues, for we are the aroma of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To one a fragrance from death to death, to the other a fragrance from life to life. Who is sufficient for these things? For we are not, like so many, peddlers of God's word, but as men of sincerity, as commissioned by God. In the sight of God, we speak in Christ. I was just like, at least in the last, I don't know, 10 minutes of the Bible study, the things that you were saying were just like, I just had that picture of us as priests and like the aroma that we carry to others, um, and what that means. And this is like a beautiful picture. And but again, God is like showing us what the things in the Old Testament mean now.
Hmm.
No, I mean, no, we're not sacrificing the lamb on the altar anymore because he has done that for us. But we still have something to offer.
Yeah.
Right.
Offer your.
And it's like our life. Like, there's a song that I kept on like kind of humming in my mind, and I can't remember all the words, but it's like, sanctuary, yeah, living sacrifice for you.
Mhm.
And I was just like, Lord, am I like, that's a humbling thing. Am I living in a way that I am like spreading the aroma of Christ, and I'm bringing life to those who are being saved, and it says here death to those who are perishing, basically, because it's like a stench to the ones who are rejecting him. Like he's saying, he has said that he's like the cornerstone that the builders rejected, right?
Mhm.
Whatever. So it's not like we're gonna be making everybody think like la-di-da thoughts about us or anything, but there is something that we like. We are giving off the aroma of Christ by the sacrifice that we make with our life every day, and the faithfulness that we show to others, and doing things as unto the Lord, even in our like boring jobs or whatever. Anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
Great thought.
Yeah, there's yeah, a lot of priestly language given about Christians, and offer up yourselves as a living sacrifice. This is your reasonable service. You think your reasonable service. If you attach the priest language to that, you're going, the service of the priest. This is your reasonable service. You're bringing yourself as a living sacrifice.
And like just for like your own home study, you can continue on to chapter 3 because it does go back to, it talks about Moses and talks about like a lot of cool stuff. Just like I just read it super quickly, but it just continues. It just continues. It's beautiful. And then the whole, and even chapter 5, you know, like the ministry of reconciliation, and that's like what happens when we're spreading the aroma of Christ. You know, we are ministers reconciling people to Christ.
Can you imagine?
Can we imagine what
Paul.
being Paul? Mhm. Yeah.
And just putting all of it together. And all that. Not that, you know, that he didn't know he could see. This is what all of you give me and the stories that I got.
Yeah.
And what is he, what our goal is.
Right.
Our part.
Yeah. Well, once Christ gets a hold of Paul, his brain's got to be lighting up, you know, like going, wait a minute. Yeah.
What I love about Paul is that when he has an encounter and what he does is he goes and he just sits and he waits and he waits.
Yeah.
I think to me, I think that's a prime example.
Yeah.
The waiting, the learning, the serving, and then when God calls him to go to ministry. I don't know how many. It was like a couple of years that he waited before he actually.
I think somebody figured out it was
It
a long,
10 years,
7 years.
something like that. It was a long time
Yeah.
for him to just sit away. I mean, I'm pretty sure his mind was cracked.
Yeah.
You know, all the scriptures, like, yeah, coming together.
Yeah.
This is what that meant.
This is what that is. I would have loved to have been like a fellow, you like on that walk to Emmaus, you know, like where Jesus is like, you know, like doing like a 5-mile trip with them or something like that. And he's just kind of like walking along and he's starting from the beginning. He goes and explains everything and they're going, oh, that's what that is. And that's what that is, you know? And then, you know, they're just going, we get it now. And their hearts burn, you know? But yeah, if you really had that in your mind, first century, I think like that when Jesus came, when you look at like all the things that were written outside of the Bible at that time, you had an environment that was ripe for people to get things. Okay, like I don't think that it's I don't think that like it was like the right time any other time, right? Like as far as that goes, right? So and like the Book of Enoch, right? The Book of Enoch is written, you know, like in that they call it Second Temple literature. So basically, from where the time where the Old Testament ends with Ezra and Nehemiah, up until like the time where Christ shows up on the scene, you have all of these apocalyptic and literature and speculation about like who the second Yahweh is. One of them, one of the books in Qumran is called it's called Melchizedek. It's like Q5 Melchizedek or something like that, right? And they start talking about like how Melchizedek is the second Yahweh figure, and somebody's like just kind of speculating and writing about it. These are, you know, speculative, whatever. There's like the Apocalypse of Abraham, and there's all these other, you know, some of the apocryphal books and pseudepigraphal books come from that era. And you're going, well, why were they even like kind of like important in the church? And just because it's not in the canon, they shouldn't be in the canon, right? So you got to make that distinction. But they're important because you can see where their mind was at, because they're going, could this be it? Could this be it? Could this be it? And it's kind of like they're getting close, right? In some cases, and you've got like you got like people are thinking, well, Enoch. What about Enoch? And he kind of becomes exalted, or maybe it's an exalted angel. What about Michael? And who could be like this, the angel of the Lord? Who's this? But it's kind of like a lot of times you get almost all of the pieces of the puzzle fitting, but there's still a few that are missing. And then when you take all those things combined and you put Christ in there, you're going, wait, this is the angel of the Lord. This is that priest king in the order of Melchizedek. He fits the timeline. He fits like being in the right line of David, you know. And he's still the suffering servant, and it's just he represents Israel, but he's this individual, and you're going, everything starts falling into place. And then when you have Bible writers like Paul, who's familiar not just with the Torah, but he's familiar with like all this other stuff. And you know, John has like Jude and James. They have like these books like Enoch and stuff in their brain. Then they're going, wait a minute, this is what everybody's been like stabbing at and getting at, and Christ fits the ticket. This is him. Yeah. Plus, Daniel pretty much points the exact same day that Christ would present himself as. So, you know, but we kind of dismissed all that. But Christianity fell into like such traditions that like we kind of like drifted away from those. We drifted away from that. You know?
Oh, now I remembered all the words Nicole said.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say.
Oh. Quick, grab the guitar. Yeah, we bring the sacrifice of praise. Yeah. That's. But like we have some. What was
theology?
That's actually good theology. We're bringing sacrifice of praise. Yeah. Some of the hymns have like really good theology, or like I should say theology that we've lost touch with, you know, in more modern church. Even like Joy to the World, which is actually not a Christmas song, it's about the millennium. You know, it's done with it was written with a different mindset than most of our church communities can really grasp to see what that song is actually saying, you know. But yeah. Well, I guess now that's why I had a short outline today. It's because I knew we'd go on for a while. But I love our discussions, so it's great, and it's good to see you guys again. And I'll close it up now because I do want to watch an episode of Chosen if you're up for that, you know. Okay, we'll see you, Linan.
Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
All right, bye.
Blessings.
Bless you.